afternoon, Adam Story with ABC News. The State Emergency Service says the Hunter is the latest region to be hard hit by severe thunderstorms. There have been more than 800 calls for help across the state due to the storms last night and this morning. Sydney alone received over 350 calls for assistance, with parts of the northern beaches and Sydney's east receiving torrential rain. SES spokesperson Alicia Dooley says today's focus has been Maitland.
Our main areas that have been hit have been Maitland today, where an isolated burst came through of 75 jobs at about midday today. This required some sandbags for a couple of shops and childcare centre in the main areas.
Meanwhile, the unit commander for Warringah Pittwater, Jenny Park, says Sydney's northern beaches have been one of the hardest hit areas, with water coming into homes. She says many large trees also came down in the strong winds last night and this morning.
So there's some of those that we haven't been able to do today, but we've done as many as we could. All the ones that have come down over driveways, for example, where they've been blocking access into the house, we've done those.
One lane has been reopened on the Great Western Highway in the Blue Mountains following a multi-car pile-up. Danuta Kazaki reports.
The accident happened just after lunchtime this afternoon, with the highway closed for hours between Leura Mall in Leura and Scott Avenue in Wentworth Falls. 7 people, including a child, have been taken to hospitals across Western Sydney. Police say a man believed to be in his 50s is in a serious but stable condition with suspected hip and rib injuries. The accident involved a truck and 5 cars. Motorists are being urged to avoid the area, with only one eastbound lane open and all westbound lanes of the Great Western Highway closed as police investigations continue.
The Prime Minister has sought to reassure Australians with average super balances they would not be the focus of a potential overhaul of super tax concessions. Nicole Haggerty reports from Canberra.
Super contributions are taxed at a lower rate than other forms of income, with employees who make additional contributions also enjoying a lower tax rate. But more than 11,000 Australians have super balances over $5 million, prompting a warning from Treasurer Jim Chalmers that Australia's on track to spend more on super concessions than the aged pension by 2050. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says those with the average $150,000 balance won't be hit by any changes.
That's not an issue at all.
Opposition leader Peter Dutton says changes would be detrimental.
Wages are growing slowly, but at a rate still well below inflation. With the details, here's Daniel Ziffer.
The Wage Price Index, or WPI, rose by 0.8% in the December quarter, helping to lift annual growth to 3.3% for the year to December. The annual pace of wage growth lifted marginally from 3.2% in the previous quarter, according to new Australian Bureau of Statistics data. The figure is below what analysts had predicted. The result may reduce the pressure on the Reserve Bank to lift interest rates as it attempts to stem high inflation. But people's real wages are falling because their purchasing power is being eroded. The Consumer Price Index is currently at 7.8%, and that's far higher than wages are rising.
And that wages data helped regain some losses on the local share market today. The ASX 200 lost 0.3%, went on 7,314. And the Australian dollar currently trading at 68.3 US cents. The NRL's player pay dispute has led to the threat of further action ahead of the start of the 2023 season. ABC Sports' Daniel Garb reports.
Just 9 days out from the opening game of the season, the NRL has cancelled its season launch amid the ongoing collective bargaining agreement dispute with the players. Parramatta star Junior Paulo says the players will take action if they need to, as they stand firm on their demands, but is confident of a resolution. The Roosters' Victor Radley says the players are being fair.
I know that we're all on the same page, and we know that what we're going for is fair and what we think is right, so we're going to hold on to that.
The players say the two parties aren't where they need to be just yet, but they are moving in the right direction.
And Christian Welch will captain the Melbourne Storm for a second consecutive season. The Storm announced his reappointment of the 28-year-old and says the front row will have 3 new vice-captains, Harry Grant, Jerome Hughes and Cameron Munster. A few showers and the chance of a thunderstorm in the northeast tomorrow. There's the chance of a shower elsewhere in the east as well. Early fog patches in the southeast. It'll be dry and mostly sunny in the west. For Sydney, an overnight low of 19, followed by a partly cloudy day, the slight chance of a shower and a top of 26. That's ABC News at 5:05.
You're listening to Drive with Richard Glover
on ABC Radio Sydney.
G'day, Richard Glover with you on ABC Radio Sydney. I hope you're well. Today, the PM promises no big changes with superannuation. But what of the 80,000 accounts with balances of over 2 million? Do they remain in his sights? Also today... the push to heat-proof our cities and a visit to the place that's leading the charge. It's Paris. That's Self-Improvement Wednesday. In about 10 or 15 minutes. And later still, digital radio on TV's Channel 25 and, of course, online everywhere. Talking about what your indicator of inflation is. What's the product you know quite well and so you think, look, I don't need to read a newspaper study here on the radio what the inflation rate is. I get it because of this thing I buy or I'd like to buy all the time. We heard from the lady who sent her teenager off to get the usual order, the $10 of chips and 3 scallops. Suddenly it's $13. The kid doesn't have enough money. That's a measure of inflation. Me walking past the sandwich shop and seeing the toasted ham and cheese sandwich is $14.90. How can that be? How can that be? Liquid clothes detergent, says Paul, is something I noticed going up. It used to be $20 for 2 litres, but Colesworth regularly had it on special for $10. Now it's $26, hardly ever on special. This product would be highly machine-produced. You can buy the same brand for about $8 overseas. One of my horse feeds says, we don't have many listeners who have horses, do we? But this one does. One of my horse feeds has gone from $30 a bag 18 months ago to $64. That's inflation. And this is kind of good too in terms of what's happening. Inflation indicator, my bulk billing doctor now charges $75 for a visit. So that's the other thing that's happening, isn't it? The medical system and the number of bulk billing doctors is going so sharply down. What's your inflation indicator? What have you noticed that really brings home to you the price, the rate of inflation at the moment? 1300 222 702. On the text 0467 922 702. How do you measure it? Is it the money you pay for a product, or like the listener who texted in, you've still got the $100 that you use at the supermarket every week, and instead of coming out with the 6 bags you used to come out with, you now come out with 2.5 bags. Is it a measure of that, the amount that you can buy from the money you've got? It's 8 minutes past 5 here on ABC Radio Sydney. Let's quickly check the traffic.
ABC Radio Sydney traffic.
And then this intriguing statement from the boss of our spy services that spying is not some sort of romantic Cold War thing. It's absolutely going on in Australia at the moment. In fact, at an ever-increasing level. We'll talk about that in a tick. At Carlingford, Pennant Hills Road, at Baker Street, the lights are blacked out. Heavy traffic conditions affecting all directions. At Wentworth Falls, this has been the bad one of the afternoon. Great Western Highway between Lura Mall and Scott Avenue. Multiple vehicles involved in a crash there earlier in the afternoon. The highway remains closed westbound with now one eastbound lane open. So one lane closed, one lane open eastbound, but entirely closed westbound. Bondi Beach, Campbell Parade at Curlewis Street, the lights are flashing yellow. And Carlingford, Pennant Hills Road at Carlingford Road, a car and pedestrian accident there with one northbound lane closed. Last one is Galston Road at Calderwood Road, 2 cars involved in a crash, both directions affected.
You're with Richard Glover on ABC Radio Sydney.
Well, more Australians are being targeted for espionage and foreign interference than at any time in Australia's history. So says ASIO Chief Mike Burgess. He made the comments as part of his annual threat assessment, saying ASIO had identified a hive of spies seeking to steal sensitive information. Sarah Kendall is from the law faculty at the University of Queensland, and she joins us here on Drive. Sarah, good afternoon.
Hi, thanks for having me.
He kind of counselled us, I suppose, not to think of spying as some sort of romantic Cold War notion that you might find in a novel, but something that's very much here and now. Do you agree with that?
I would, yeah. I think ASIO has definitely said that espionage is on the rise here in Australia.
You've written a piece about it in the conversation. The one critical thing you say is you wonder why we're not prosecuting more people.
Yeah, so back in 2018, the federal government actually overhauled our espionage offences. So prior to 2018, we only had 4 counter-espionage laws, And then come 2018, we actually introduced 27 new offences. Now, these offences are quite broad. They're quite tough as well. They prescribe up to life imprisonment if you're convicted. So we introduced these really tough new laws in 2018. But since then, these laws haven't actually been used at all. And this is despite the ASIO chief saying that, they discovered a hive of spies that was identified and disrupted.
And it sounds like they just sent them home, does it?
Yes, yeah, they were just removed from Australia.
Is that the best thing to do, though? I mean, maybe that's the best thing to do rather than create an ongoing tension, diplomatic tension with whatever country they're from.
Yeah, perhaps. So I can't really comment on what the best course of action is, but definitely if we were to prosecute foreign spies, there are, all those diplomatic considerations do come into play.
But you still wonder, I suppose, why we introduce these laws if we're not going to use them.
Precisely, especially because we introduced so many laws. They're so tough. They're so broad. So there is a question around, are these laws really necessary, or are all of them really necessary?
Or are we better to not have such laws but keep on getting rid of the people, which just seems to be what we're doing. Hey, Sarah, thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
There's Sarah Kendall from the Faculty of Law at the University of Queensland talking about, the fact that we introduced all these laws but seem to be committed to not particularly using them. We just show people the door. 20 degrees in the city, 20 in Camden, 21 in Gosford, 12 in Mount Boyce, 20 in Penrith, 20 in Cronulla. A 70% chance of showers today, most likely easing in the late afternoon. Tomorrow, a minimum of 19, a maximum of 25. Partly cloudy with a slight 20% chance of a shower. It's currently 12 minutes past 5. Coming up, Self-Improvement Wednesday will be on your radio with a trip to Gay Paris.
The Queen Victoria building will be renamed in the lead up to World Pride.
With James Valentine.
Well, the QVB is obviously such an iconic Sydney building, so it's sending this message of acceptance, celebration and inclusion.
And is there anything else like this, a building's being lit up?
The entire city will be one giant rainbow during Sydney World Pride, James.
Weekdays from 5:30.
You won't be able to turn your head and not see a rainbow.
ABC Radio Sydney.
The self-improvement in a second, but what's your inflation indicator? We've heard about cat food and horse food and laundry powder and hot chips and avocados. What's the product where you're aware of it? You're aware of the price of it. Rebecca is on the line. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, Rebecca. Sorry. Hi, Richard. My dad fell out of bed last week, and so I thought I'd go and make him a big lasagna, 8 slices, so he'd have, lots of meals. $50 nearly it cost me to make a homemade lasagna of 8 slices.
Wow. So that's mince meat, a couple of cans of tomatoes, and some milk and flour for the white sauce, right?
Well, it was $16 for a kilo of mince. It's got mozzarella, parmesan and tasty cheese, so they were $8 a packet.
Wow.
The fresh lasagna sheets, a litre of milk, and, a few other things. And, I nearly died.
Because that's it's a lovely meal, actually. That's one of the great meals, but it's supposed to be something which can feed a lot of people with not so much money, right?
Well, I was thinking, I know why people go to the supermarket freezer and buy the $16 frozen one.
Yeah.
It doesn't taste as nice, but
yours.
Do you know what I mean?
I haven't tasted yours, Rebecca, but I know it's going to be nicer, right?
Yeah, thank you.
and also made with love for your dad, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So that beats the frozen one. Good on you, Rebecca. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, there you go. $50 for a homemade lasagna with just the price of cheese and the price of the mince and the milk and, everything else. What's your great inflation indicator? The product that used to, the price of, and you're amazed by the price now. My son buys chicken breasts, $11 per kilo. It's cheaper than the $31 kilo dog treats, but it's an identical product. So people are saying substituting homemade stuff from the commercial stuff because the commercial stuff is so expensive. Aldi facial tissues have gone from 95 cents to $2.49. Inflation is here and everyone is feeling it. What a price rise. I can't do the maths on it. Get Adam Spencer in, but 95 cents to $2.49. What sort of percentage increase is that? 1300 222 702. And someone else says Tim Tams. They don't give me the prices. They just say Tim Tams. What about you? What's your inflation indicator at the moment? 1300 222 702 or on the text 0467 922 702. Are you one of our regular students for Self-Improvement Wednesday? Each week you get to learn something new. Your lesson this week, urban cooling, done well. Your teacher is Associate Professor Sebastian Fauch from the School of Urban Studies at Western Sydney University. Good afternoon.
Hello, good to see you.
I thought we might just start with a little bit from Simon Marnie's weekend show, just this last Sunday. It was the Mayor of Blacktown City Council. His name is Tony Bleasdale, and it was very hot weather last weekend, so Simon got him on the radio to say this.
Well, a cool centre is a location where families, anyone can go along on a really hot, severe day and cool down. And what we do, we have air conditioning within them cool centres. We have cold drinks. We have all kinds of activities for children to participate in whilst they are cooling down.
Okay, the idea of a cool centre already being tested in Blacktown City Council with the Mayor Tony Bleasdale. But of course, this is a worldwide phenomenon, isn't it? And some cities are really quite advanced in it.
That's right. And I mean, Blacktown is the hottest part of the Greater Sydney Basin. They really need to crank it up a bit more than having a single cooling shelter. And that was only a trial. There were big issues around how to actually pay for the space, or if you use an RSL, how do you not get people into pokies that are only coming for cooling? So it's a tricky one because we don't have the infrastructure yet.
Okay, so let's have a good hard look at Paris, because they've had a huge problem with heat in the past, including big mortality rates during hot summers.
I don't know if you remember 2003, but they had tens of thousands of people dying. It was the holiday season, summer holidays. The families were gone and the oldies were left behind. And they basically died of dehydration. And it was extremely tragic to see. Totally preventable.
And traditionally in Paris, there's something about Paris, I don't know what it is, but the temperatures traditionally have been 10% higher than in the surrounding countryside.
That's right, Richard. And think about, picture Paris. It's lots of heritage-protected buildings. 4 stories high apartments. You can't clonk air conditioning systems on these. It's forbidden. All the palaces, all these historic buildings cannot have air conditioning as we know it, where you just put something on the roof. The structures wouldn't hold. So they needed to come up with ideas of what else can we do? And they did fantastic.
And they certainly did. So they've gone from 2003, when the excess mortality rate from the heat wave then was plus 142%.
Staggering.
Compared to anywhere else in France. Now, they've had a recent, in 2019, so a relatively recent occasion when they also had a heat wave, and yet the mortality rates were nothing like what they were in 2003.
Yes, and they're predicting that they will go down and down and down because of all the measures that were implemented. We can talk about these measures. I have to say, even in 1991, because of this building associated issue with not having air conditioning on the outside, they needed to come up with something else and started building an underground cooling system for the city center of Paris. And that's the world's largest urban cooling system today. It's an incredible piece of engineering. About 100 kilometers of pipes underground that suck in the water from the River Seine, use that, supercool it down to 4 degrees, and then pipe that into palaces, into the Ritz, the Louvre, hospitals, everything. They've got thousands and thousands of square meters millions actually, of square meters of urban building space that they cool down with this system. It's
that's an important part of this big engineering project, but it's not the only part, is it? They also, for instance, they have climate-adapted schoolyards.
Right. They also plant microforests where they can. A very interesting aspect about what Paris is doing is a process they call demineralization. It's ripping up surfaces and making them permeable for absorption of stormwater, which then helps later on cooling. That includes green roofs, streets, car parks, roads, walkways, everything. There are lots of measures that are implemented. We see misting in nearly 50 public spaces where when it's hot, they just switch the misting systems on. We have walking apps that give you the coolest route from point A to B, where you can just check where you have the coolest conditions to walk through the city. So they're doing, as I keep saying, a multi-pronged approach, not just giving out little icicle poppy sticks for the kids, but really looking into how can we cool the entire urban space down to make it more comfortable for people in summer. I
like the idea of splash fountains. Tell me about the splash fountains.
Yes, the splash fountains. They actually are open for you to have a dip if you want to. Try to think of a fountain. I can only think of one or two in the city centre here in Sydney. In Paris, you have dozens of them. They're just a feature.
So you could jump into the Hyde Park fountain without getting arrested.
Correct. Yes, have some fun out there. Also, of course, that means they look after the air quality, about the water quality from those fountains, so that you're not getting sick jumping in there. You have to provide for these kind of things, but it's possible. It's showing us that it's possible. That's the important message. It can be done.
Okay, the demineralisation is something we can learn from in Sydney, isn't it? We've talked about this before, the amount of hard surfaces we've managed to build into our city, which, of course, just attract the heat, don't they?
Yes, and store it and then re-radiate it into the night, which gets our nighttime temperatures up, which is a huge problem because it's at night when we don't recover from those very hot days, and we see hospital admissions going up because old people really suffer.
Is that right? So when you're talking about mortality and heat, it's really the nighttime temperature that's more significant than the daytime temperature.
That's right, because during the day your body tries to cope with the heat, but during the night it needs to recover from it. And if it can't recover, and we see that from 2 to 3 days of heat waves every time across the Sydney Basin, it's that time just after you had, 3 hot days, 2 hot nights, that hospital admissions go up because your body tries to cool down. And that means even if you don't have any body action, even if you lie down, your heart needs to pump the blood through your body much harder. And that already causes heart attacks, cardiac arrests, and so on by old people, which are very vulnerable to those kind of conditions.
Now, a number of cities worldwide have signed up to this. Paris is obviously the leader at the moment, but this is a worldwide movement, isn't it?
And part of it belongs to what Sydney also has signed up to, which is a project by the Rockefeller Foundation across 100 cities, the Resilient Cities program worldwide. But as you said, Paris is leading the pack and Sydney is far behind when it comes to these integrated measures of providing cooling in public spaces.
Okay, out of the things that Paris is doing, what are the most urgent things on your list for us to copy?
Demineralisation would be very high up. Ripping up the hard surfaces, providing much more light, coloured, open surfaces, much more green roofs, not only on office buildings, but also on residential buildings, provide incentive programs. We've seen this in Portland, of how great in Oregon, Portland, this works. When you have an incentive program, you suddenly have an industry that can provide the services. And even if you drive the incentive programs down, the experience is now in the system, and the uptake of green roofs in Portland has remained high. So you even have.
I mean, when you say green roofs, you mean with plants growing on them.
That green stuff. Yes.
Not just coloured green.
No, you can't just paint them green, Richard. Yeah. You have to put some substrate on them. There are extensive, so low maintenance, and intensive green roofs. Here in Sydney, we had a very nice study from a building near Barangaroo that combines green with solar. And it was showing, this was actually from UTS right next to you, was showing that the green roof that had solar on it worked better and produced more energy more efficiently because the greening helped to cool down the solar panels. And therefore the solar panels worked more efficiently by generating regenerative electricity. So it was just a really nice example of how you can combine the technologies that we have today available to us and make them work for us.
But even if you don't go to that degree, the colour of the roof is important, isn't it? You see so much in so many. Monument is the current trendy colour, right? And it's a very dark grey. It's almost black, really. And
after all these years, I don't know if your listeners want to hear me talking about black roofs again, but It's just not going away. It's one of those things where I really bang my head against the wall. It's such an easy change. And we even have technology available to retrofit. So if you have a dark roof, and I've got colleagues that come to me now and say, hey, Sebastian, what can I do? I've just got a new roof. And I tell them there are products out there, even made in Australia. You can actually retrofit your dark roof without a big cost and make it light coloured. And
they kind of resurface it, do they?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. They spray it on, and it makes a huge difference instantly.
It's such a weird thing, isn't it? Because I think Monument is a very attractive colour, but, use it on your front door or something. Why put it on the roof? You can't see it yourself.
And then you start painting your driveway in that same colour, which, of course, brings all the heat down to the ground and into your house as well from the ground level, not just from the roof level. So there are some very strange things happening in our urban design at the moment.
Okay, so demineralisation, as they call it, maybe number one, but a few fountains that you could prance around in, and a bit of misting sounds pretty good as well.
Yeah, with the misting, I'm still critical, particularly in our climate, because there are some maintenance issues with clogging, with if you don't use it for half a year because you don't need it, you need to flush it, you get the nasties out. So there's a bit of work that needs to be done, how to best use it in a climate like in Sydney.
Okay, but misting you could do.
Well, that is misting.
Oh, I thought
that is misting.
But you don't have to make sure that's particularly clean. It's fresh water, isn't it?
Well, you would absolutely use fresh water. Otherwise, you send people through a mist of nasties.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Misting is great. It's immediate cooling. We've just seen it at the Australian Open in Melbourne being used, where you had misting stations. It works fantastic. We have no misting publicly on a large scale anywhere in Sydney. I can't think of a place.
No.
Maybe your listeners do, but I can't think of a place that provides that kind of technology.
And I know this is only a small part of the mix, but could we have some bubblers back? I know there are a few, but we were talking about school bags with Anna Louise Bouvier yesterday, and she was encouraging kids to with these overloaded backpacks, she was encouraging kids to take your empty water bottle to school and fill it up at school. And people said, that's all very well, but we've only got one tap at school. We've only got one bubbler at school. Sometimes it doesn't work.
Yeah. And I've been advocating for more of those drinking water fountains in playgrounds, for example, where we built a demonstration site in Western Sydney, a UV Smart Cool playground. One of the big aspects to bring in there was drinking water, because if you stay hydrated, you stay cooler. Public drinking water fountains would be great.
Okay, let's bring a little bit of Paris coolness to literal coolness to Sydney. Thank you very much for the lesson.
Thank you, Richard.
It's another Self-Improvement Wednesday, this week with Associate Professor Sebastian Fauch from the School of Urban Studies at Western Sydney University. You can listen again to his lesson online, of course, abc.net.au/Sydney. Next week, it's the turn of Professor Richard Kingsford from the Centre for Ecosystem Science at the University of New South Wales. That's Self-Improvement Wednesday next week.
ABC Radio Sydney Traffic.
And Jeff Wallace is here from the Australian Traffic Network. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Richard. On camera, the M4 Granville. Now, two lanes have been shut down. It's just past James Riss Drive, the lower viaduct section, the far right. As you head west out towards the Cumberland Highway, they're doing emergency work. But I am seeing delays back towards Auburn. You can get west on the M4 through Granville using the far left lanes on the upper viaduct. Wentworth Falls, earlier serious crash, still blocking the Great Western Highway near Lura Mall westbound. Eastbound one lane's been reopened. And Paddington, breakdown for Oxford Street citybound near Young Street. I'm Jeff Wallace from the Australian Traffic Network.
Jeff, thank you very much. Just a few notes about the various ways of making the city cooler. There are a few cases of misting around the place. The Newport Hotel apparently has some misting, and Parramatta Park has a cafe with some misting, says Neil. Harris Farm, but they use the mist to make the vegetables heavier. Are we on to their secrets, are we? There were some misters in some parts of Mardi Gras Fair Day on Sunday, and it did make a massive difference. We needed a lot more, though, says Jess. Le Coq Restaurant in Rozelle has some lovely misting, says Sean in Lilyfield. And what else? What other methods? We're talking about the colour bond roofs, but Lee adds, what about the fences too? I'm always amazed at the number of colour bond metal fencing in Adelaide. The heat it generates must stick around for ages in the atmosphere. There must be an alternative to that as well. And those monument roofs, this colour, this dark grey colour that everyone's really into at the moment. Jeff says, Richard, monument will be the olive green and burnt orange. that we had in the 70s. I'm a builder. I'm so over it. Surf mist is the best roof colour. That's from Jeff. Yeah, Monument will look so burnt orange in a few decades' time. That's his prediction.